Amber Heard is one of me out. I mean, she's dangerously attractive and has a kind of, there's sort of a darkness to her. She doesn't strike me as somebody who I would trust much more than I could throw her. That's always been my instinct. But there is something about, maybe this says something about me, there is something about women that have that kind of femme fatale thing that can actually be quite appealing. And even in this moment, I'm like, that woman is absolutely out of her mind, just not a good person, and yet I still find her extremely attractive. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. Yeah, so audio has come out. I know normally I talk about politics and whatnot, but this seems like it ties into a much broader issue, and I think it's worth addressing. So yeah, as many of you might know, a while back, a couple years ago now, there was a divorce that Johnny Depp had from Amber Heard, who they'd been married for a couple of years. And I was surprised when they got together in the first place, because my understanding was that Amber Heard was a lesbian. But I mean, apparently not. Or, maybe she's bi, or, who knows what the situation was. But regardless, when they got a divorce, what happened was she came out, and as is quite often the case, she said that he was abusive towards her, and that she wanted to get, I think she was going to get like $7 million from him or something like that, and that's how much she wanted as part of her settlement. Now Johnny Depp came out and he denied the entire thing, and I remember the whole time when I heard her talk about it and I saw some of the video about it, I was like, something's not quite right here. And this was right in the middle of the whole Me Too situation, and it seemed like the smartest thing for Johnny Depp to do was just to pay the money and be done with it. And everybody started saying, oh, it's because she just wants money and all this kind of thing. And then Amber Heard came out and said, well, I'm going to give it all to charity. I'm doing this, I'm going to give it to some women's charity. Then Johnny Depp said, okay, fine, you can give it to this woman's charity, but he says, I'll give it to him directly. Just tell me where it is. And the red flag for me, one of a number of red flags, came up when she said, no, you need to give it to me, because apparently she didn't want for him to get the tax write-off. Which always seemed like kind of a lame excuse, if you ask me. It was like, who really cares as long as you're going to be giving this money to, the same place. Long story short, it looks like really she was the one who had been abusive towards him, and has admitted on a tape that everybody was going to believe her, nobody was going to believe him. And she essentially manipulated the system and the press and everybody in order to destroy Johnny Depp's life. And she succeeded in doing so. I mean, he's no longer in the Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't know if you've seen Johnny Depp recently, but he went and joined like this band, the Hollywood Vampires. And if you see him, he looks like he's on drugs. He looks like he's he doesn't look good, and he's sort of disappeared from the public eye in a lot of different ways. It seems like it really messed with him. And meanwhile, Amber Heard, she's kind of only had seen her career go up, and she dated Elon Musk afterwards. and everything seems to be hunky-dory for her. Now, this leads to a bigger issue as far as I'm concerned about Me Too. Now, I'm sure that for many, many years, the argument is made that if a woman comes out and says, she has no incentive to lie about things like this. And I believe that for much of the time, much of like human history, that's probably been the case, because there would be a big backlash. However, the thing is, the same way in economics that, there's a supply and demand for something, if you can't just, when you change one thing about a system, you're going to change other things about it. Nothing exists in a vacuum. It's the reason why when you redistribute resources or you change incentives, other things follow. So for example, there are a lot of people who probably need assistance from the government who, if they could get a check or whatever it was during, the periods of hardship, that it would be extremely beneficial to them and to their families. And most people, I think, would only use that system when it was necessary for them. However, if you make it easy enough for people, there's always going to be people who abuse that system. So as long as there is a stigma, for example, against welfare, and people don't want to be on welfare, then most people are only going to use it if they really have to use it. And then people might say, hey, but if somebody has to use welfare, there shouldn't be any shame in that. What's the problem with that? And that's true. For the people that really need to use it, I don't want them to feel ashamed if they really just have to use it. But once the stigma is gone, that also incentivizes people to use welfare who might not really need it, or to, use it as a crutch when really it doesn't necessarily need to be. So my point in all of this is that, if you change something, you're going to change other things, and they're probably going to change in ways that you don't anticipate. When, for example, the cost of a woman coming out and saying, this person sexually harassed me, or, this guy beat me, or whatever it was, when the cost of that was very high, meaning that people were going to ask you what you did and blame you, and what were you wearing, what did you do to drive him to that, all of that sort of thing. When people would ask you things like that, even women who, maybe had it really just were in a really terrible situation would be asked those things. It means that, only the people who really had to, really had to, would be the ones who would come forward. And there, only a very small minority where it would be where people are lying. However, the world wherein a woman is scrutinized and not believed and has to deal with all this crap, I'm not saying that's gone, but we live in a very different environment today. There have been men that have come out, let's say Aziz Ansari, who had a bad date, in essence, but a woman felt bad about it, and so he was basically canceled because of it. The cost for him, just not being able to read this woman's mind, was that he went through a lot of shit because of it. Once the incentive is, well, believe women, you're supposed to believe women, and once the consequences for coming out are minimal, and in many cases, it seems like you're going to be you actually get lifted up. Like in the case of Amber Heard, it increased her profile. She was able to get all these lucrative deals, and got cast in Aquaman, all this different stuff. She became like this sort of feminist hero, and she was being spoken of as being so brave and all of this kind of thing. That is not this. The point is, it's not the same world. The world in which women should be assumed that they're almost always telling the truth is a world that doesn't exist anymore. It's a world where all of the incentives were stacked against them instead of the incentives being stacked in the opposite direction. Because, while I am glad that there are a lot of women who maybe wouldn't have been taken seriously in the past, who now do have their claims taken seriously. And by the way, I still absolutely think that when we say believe women, I think that means really you should be taking women seriously when they say stuff like this, because not all of them are going to be the Amber Heards of the world. However, we have to realize that the easier you make it for someone to come forward, and whatever incentives you've put in place, there are going to be cynical actors who come in and take advantage of that system. There is no such thing as a perfect system. And this goes back to a lot of what I talk about with Andrew Yang and, Bernie Sanders and whatnot. It's, talking about a system where justice in the sexual realm or the gender realm is always done correctly. Whatever system, you can say that, well, no woman should have to do this, no man should have to do this, we should be equal in this way. It's one thing to say it, but once it comes down to the actual prescriptions of what you're supposed to change in order to make those things happen, it's quite often something that has plenty of flaws in its own right, and in many cases is worse than what happened to begin with. So it seems to me that look how many of these cases that have come out, it turns out that it's much more complicated than that. And how long did it take before, somebody came along and took advantage of the fact that people are likely to believe her? It didn't take long at all. And so look at it this way. I'm a pretty forgiving guy, generally speaking. I'm not a big fan of cancel culture, as it's called, because I don't believe that I'm on some team in some tribe that possesses all of the virtue of the world. And I realize, I believe, fundamentally that we're all sinners, so to speak. There are all of these sort of religious ideas and things that I kind of took for granted growing up, and then I'm realizing that, regardless of whether you believe these things in a literal sense, there's a reason that like people had those things, like ideas like, we're all God's children. To me, that's not like a logical argument necessarily. But it is true. It's correct in that sense. So, things like due process and whatnot, and the presumption of innocence, we do that for a reason. We do that for a very good reason. So, the case with Amber Heard, it's like, this is going to be the real test. What are people going to say about this? What are the people who came out and were just up in arms about all of this? What are they going to say in response? And what I presume is going to happen, unfortunately, is that not much is going to happen to her. I think, there's a petition right now to get her taken off of Aquaman 2. Now, and I know that she was just at the Women's March, a few weeks ago, talking about how brave everybody was and stuff like that. I think she's playing into every stereotype, all of the worst ideas that people have about feminists and everybody's like worst fears is that this is a woman who could have any man she wants. She's one of the most beautiful women in the world. She could get, she dated Elon Musk again. It's like she is, the world is her oyster, and then just to still have just the narcissism to appropriate an entire movement and to try to take out apparently her. I don't think it's just her anger at Johnny Depp. I think it's her anger at men generally, from what I've heard of her. I don't know what she's been through in her life, but it seems like she's a lot of anger there. And I don't think anything's going to happen. I don't think anything's going to happen to her. She's maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is so blatant that something will happen. But I'll tell you what, Johnny Depp isn't getting his Pirates of the Caribbean gig back. He can make all the money back, but his image has taken like a major hit because of this. And I think that if people want to be taken seriously about stuff like this, they need to come out and say something about her lying and appropriating a movement in the way that she did. Now, this is telling. When all of this went down, I saw things about it in every major newspaper. People were coming out in all the big publications talking about how, Amber Heard, was abused in this relationship and all this sort of thing. We were still in that, believe women stage of things. But now, all of this stuff that's coming out right now about these audio tapes where she's basically saying, oh, you wimp, like, don't cry, and yeah, sure, I hit you, and all this sort of stuff, and nobody's going to believe you. All of this total bombshell stuff. I went on and I looked it up. You can look right now, like type in Amber Heard, Johnny Depp. And there were, I think the only papers or news sources that I saw that are reporting on this thing, or this most recent thing, was USA Today and the Daily Mail, who leaked the audio tape in Britain. So it goes to show you, to me, that there's clearly an agenda at play here. How come this isn't in the New York Times? How come this isn't, coming out in the Washington Post? Why are all of these, why is all of a sudden this not news, apparently? And I don't know, maybe they will report on it, or maybe they didn't report on it as much in the first place, but I'm pretty sure they did, because I saw this story everywhere. But it seems to me there's all these random little publications that are talking about it, and in the same thing about, the Iowa caucuses that I was talking about today. A lot of it, at the end of the day, doesn't even come back to what the end results are. What seems to matter is the impression that's given on any given time. She already won. They say there's a reason we don't give people that much power to just destroy people just based on an accusation. It's because, they say hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. There's something to that, man. Like, and maybe not all women, and whatever, but it's been said that there's what is this trait? What is it called? Oh yeah, like agreeableness or whatever, which women are higher in, apparently, for the most part. The thing is, so it's like this idea that, okay, women are more compassionate and all of that sort of thing. That's true, but the thing that's always left out of it is that it's the mother bear syndrome. So there's nobody who's more compassionate than a mother bear protecting her cubs, right? Her love for her cubs is so great that, if you come near them, she will not just hurt you, she will fucking end you. She will sadistically destroy you in the worst possible way. And so again, there is a reverse side to compassion. And I think we see this playing out a lot in our current political discourse. And it's this notion that people who are not among the in-group, so to speak, who are not the people you feel compassion towards, are not just dismissed. No, you say she's not a conservative, she won't be canceled. I agree. I don't think she will be canceled. And I mean, I think that and again, I'm not a big fan of just completely canceling people generally, but literally the lady, I think, didn't his finger fall off? She hit him, it's coming out, she hit him with a vodka bottle and his finger fell off and they had to reattach it medically. Like, can you imagine? Yeah, she cut his finger off, right. So it's like, can you imagine? All right, so people have gotten canceled. Louis C.K., you know, he masturbated in front of some girls. He asked them first. He did all this stuff. And, you know, people are objecting to the fact that he's back. And they want to, you know, and Aziz Ansari, it's like he failed to do what he could have done to bring this moment back. And all of these people are put into this one big bin that's just people who did bad sexual things, right? And it doesn't really make any sense to me. You know, Harvey Weinstein isn't the same as Aziz Ansari, isn't the same as Louis C.K., whatever it is, or Bill Cosby. He's like the worst of the worst. But now imagine if a guy completely destroyed a woman's career, cut her finger off, like got her canceled from her major station, just obliterated him, and then we find out years later that that's what she did. There would be so many pieces in the New York Times using it as proof positive that the patriarchy was alive and well, and just all of this and all of that. I mean, you can just imagine what was going to happen. So I have to think that there's at least some possibility that, you know, I don't think she'll be canceled, but I think she's gonna yeah, I know, exactly. No, you said, I think that women, exactly, it will be looked to the extremists in the media, female kind of extremists, feminist extremists. They will see this as if, oh, like, yeah, that's what happens. Like, there's so much rage inside of her because of the patriarchy. It's a religion, man. It is a religion. But the problem is that in this particular religion, it's a very like primitive kind of religion in which, first of all, there is no forgiveness. And there is still this notion of all the good being on your side, our side, and all the bad being on the other side. So, you know, men are in some sense, you know, the enemy. But, you know, for a woman like Amber Heard, she's always going to find men who she's able to date. You know, Taylor Swift now, she's kind of into that. She's always going to find men. These are very, like, powerful, attractive women. They're always going to find somebody. Who I'm worried about? I'm worried about, like, just the average, you know, Jane, who has gone out and wants to have a career and all this stuff, and has bought into all these ideas and has sort of, you know, had a bunch of guys around her who are going to lie to her and pretend like they believe all the stuff she's saying. Because make no mistake about it, if a woman is around guys who claim to believe all this stuff and be like an ally and whatnot, there's a very good chance that he is manipulating. You know, he's just being a douche. So a lot of the guys that are, you know, I try to treat women well, and in terms of like the way I actually view women, I think I have the respect for them to kind of tell them the truth about what I feel and what I think and feel. But a lot of these guys, they're going to take advantage of the fact that they're, not uptight about their sexuality, for example, and then they are going to, be with them as long as they can, and then they're gonna be gone. And we've seen more and more stories about women who, were part of this like woke progressive thing and sort of had all their fun, and now they're looking around and they're looking for some guy to marry, and they're just beginning kind of the downward trend in terms of how attractive they're going to be. They're realizing that their job isn't, this great, wonderful, sexy thing they thought it was going to be. And like, I'm worried for those women, because it's like, these are the people that are gonna who could have been, great like wives and mothers, and some of them probably still will be. But I think a lot of them, you bear the scars from the things that you go through in life. I think if you've been screwed over by enough people, or you've had enough kind of random sexual experiences that have changed the way you look at sex or whatever it is, there's some people who can just kind of come out on the other side of that and find the right person and be able to trust them and have like a good relationship. That will happen for sure. But there will also be people who at the end of the day, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They really will be sort of like a victim to the patriarchy, quote unquote, because they'll just sort of be a cog in the machine. They'll be, alone with their career and not much else, which their career probably won't be terribly fulfilling. Everything is a balance, man. Everything is a balance. I think there are a lot of good things about feminism, but with anything, there are ways in which a person can take all the wrong messages from it. It's like with Christians, for example. There are so many good, like a decent person could use Christianity or a lot of religions to orient themselves in a way with the world that helps them be better people, or they can, adopt it in a way where they just think that they're holy and righteous and everybody else is a sinner, and screw them, and go bomb people because they've, for who cares, they have a different religion than you. There's all kinds of different ways that people can be. You can use all kinds of systems or all kinds of thought systems to justify all sorts of different actions. And I think in this case, we are slowly but surely seeing the effects of what happens when you let an ideology dominate so much of our political discourse, and you fail to realize that one of the things that makes women so powerful is the fact that they pretend they don't have any power. And I think that this is proof positive. I mean, we'll see what happens with her, but I think this is proof positive that the world that the most radical feminists have been painting for some time now, that's not the world I see. And maybe it's because I live in LA or whatever, but it ain't the world I see. And, I want to see what she has to say for herself. I've checked out those people. We'll see what she has to say for herself. And again, I'm sort of being a little hyperbolic. I think she should need to pay a substantial price, because what she did is not only, we talk about like, men, you have no idea what it's like to be sexually assaulted and like have all this happen and what effect it could have. What kind of effect does it have to have a woman come into your life, destroy your entire reputation, cut off your finger, have you lose everything, and then see her career propelled to the stratosphere. You know, what does that do? So I hope that this is one of many things that helps get us back to something approaching sanity. And yeah, you see, she's not going to say anything. Yeah, no, we'll see. I don't want to get too cynical about it. I do think that enough has happened now where something might happen to her. I don't think she should be in Aquaman 2 because of what happened. She kind of got that gig in the first place, largely, you know, off of the juice she got from that situation in the first place. So I don't know. I'm not somebody who's out for scalps all the time, but this woman, she seems like an evil, like a really fucked up person, and like a total narcissist. She's probably borderline personality disorder or something like that. And, you know, the screwed up thing is she's so hot that I'd probably still date her. And let's be real. Anyways.